because those are the people who I think can reach out in community and make people aware in a way that I can't.
Well, and I just want to say for the Breast Health Collaborative, it didn't start that way. It started very much just like you're describing. It started with us, a handful of organizations coming together and doing a summit. And we called it a Breast Health Summit, and it was, you know, for the only purpose we had it was to try to bring us all together to figure out how we could provide more services for the uninsured. And we had that for 3 years before the collaborative grew out of that, because we needed a structure. You know, so you're absolutely right. Many times it has to be that grassroots start that gets the action going. It can't just be because people say we need a collaborative. I mean, it has to have that purpose.
At the dental clinic, it was definitely grassroots when it started, and there was no money, none. And it was a group of different people coming together to accomplish a goal. And we were so focused on how tragedy was affecting people, and the gross inequities that we were seeing. It was just unbelievable, and that drew all of these different people together to accomplish this goal. And at first there was just no money at all, and it was just all volunteer, all donations, and that we had to survive on that for years and years before there was actually really any money to work with.
Thank you for your comment, though, because we have a lot of interaction in our neighborhood level, not just the broader community level, but the neighborhood level.
Can I say one more?
Yes, there are some people here, though, that you could probably talk to that can share those collaborative moments with you.
I would think that a very worthwhile conversation would be to delve into the film and the comparison that you all made between River Oaks and I forget the
Westwood.
Yeah, but there's so much to be learned by that comparison. You know, if we really pour into that, and what the differences in resources have to do. And then I think we can get away from talking about ethnic groups, about nationalities, and really get to the real disparity.
Yes.
Which is more economic.
Yeah.
And you know, the striking thing about that is that the film is fabulous and it focuses on breast cancer. But I would be willing to bet you if you took AIDS, child abuse, poverty, across the line, you would see those disparities.
That's right. That's right. That's why we do incorporate that into our studies to help our funding. And on that note, I'm going to say that I always think it's really remarkable the common themes that come out, the common challenges that come out with our, very different organizations that are represented here, with our dentists and our breast cancer and our child protective services. I mean, it's pretty amazing, and I think that what you just said brings that point home even more dramatically, because for all of you other 30 other organizations, 31 organizations that are here, you're not all about these types of mission initiatives, for sure. But that's good. We want to know and learn from your perspective and your discipline, then how we can take what you have and what you know and apply it to these other areas. A lot of times we end up in those silos, and that becomes kind of a cliche. I say that word, you just kind of tune out, right? Because we say that, we hear it all the time, we're all in silos or whatever, we gotta work together. Get into the actual issue or to the neighborhood where we do our work, and you can see the common themes no matter what. And it's pretty basic stuff, it really is. So I would like to thank our panelists and give them a big round of applause. Be sure you pay attention to TURF. And take your guns, your needles, and your drills. Have a good lunch.
I think we should give another round of applause for Celeste Harrison. Awesome presentation. noticed, we have a diverse group of participants at this conference. We have grant seekers, we've got grant makers, we've got special consultants, and we've got educators, CEOs, executive directors, board members, and staff, all with varying levels of professional development, special skills, personal and professional experiences. So one of our next panel here illustrates the vast differences among our conference attendees, but also the common skill of collaborative leadership. What I'll do is I'll introduce each panelist. We have 4. Introduce each one, and then I'm going to have a specific question for each one. So we'll ask for feedback from the other panelists on that same question, and also questions from the audience. So let me start first with Carl Angel. Carl is Chief Business Development Officer of the Lone Star Circle of Care and has been with them since 2007. Lone Star Circle of Care is committed to working in collaboration with others to improve access to quality health care, and has provided his services to the Integrated Care Collaboration, ICC, where he serves as its executive director. The ICC has over 30 participating organizations across Central Texas. Carl has also been president of the board of directors of El Buen Samaritano, an Episcopal mission in Austin, since 2008. As executive director of the Integrated Care Collaboration, Carl is providing oversight and direction for the development of a completely new health information exchange for 40 counties in Texas. The exchange will allow the sharing of patient records on a real-time basis to improve the efficiency and quality of care for patients, and will also improve the capabilities of the ICC staff in the analysis of data to support clinical innovations in the healthcare system. And then we have our friend Tracy Burnett. She is the executive director of the Beacon, a multi-service, volunteer-driven center serving the homeless in downtown Houston. She is a licensed clinical social worker with 20 years of business management and administrative experience, 12 of those in the nonprofit field. Tracy couples her social work skills with her basic skills, directing one of the largest homeless service agencies in Houston. Tracy serves on multiple social service boards, including the Homeless Youth Network, and of course, the Episcopal Homeless Initiative. Next is Connie Boyd, and Connie is the president and CEO of the Coalition for the Homeless and is committed to the development and implementation of community-wide strategies that enhance, nurture, and sustain Houston's homeless provider system. Under her direction, the Coalition is advancing our community's plan to end homelessness and empowering homeless providers to better serve individuals and families. Connie also supports and guides statewide homeless provider training and technical assistance efforts as a board member for the Texas Homeless Network. And then we have our friend Susan Raft. Susan is with the Breast Health, she's the chair of the Breast Health Collaborative of Texas and founder of Pink Ribbons, and is a 16-year cancer survivor. The Pink Ribbons, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, was co-funded by Susan's sister Jane and 3 other dancers in New York City in 1995. Pink Ribbons Projects is the first arts and dance initiative founded solely to promote awareness about breast cancer and help raise funding for breast cancer advocacy and education. Since the program's inception, they have raised more than $4.5 million for the cause. So my first question goes to Carl. And Carl, as you were establishing the ICC, you had to sit down and you had to envision what the goals were and what partners you wanted to involve in the process, and if they were a good match for the collaboration and the other stakeholders. But then you ended up reaching out to some other folks, and some that you might not have necessarily done included. So my question is, why did you do that, and how did you do that?
Well, first I'll say it was refreshing to listen to the group this morning. I'm an old, emphasis on the old, not-for-profit guy. I came out of finance and mergers and acquisitions and got into nonprofits as my sort of third post-retirement career. And when I first did it, I thought, gosh, this is easy because unlike my previous life, everything people do warm and fuzzy and work together. And all you have to do is ask people for money and they give it to you. So I'm glad to hear that this morning. So, collaborations are hard. And in 2009, I started working on the ICC as requested of the board at that time. And frankly, the ICC had fallen into some disrepair. Members participating had dropped significantly. Technology was out of date, and what primarily I was looking at was the finances, and what people had thought was a significant surplus in the budget was in fact a significant deficit. The one thing learning I took from that is that many nonprofits tend to confuse cash and accrual accounting. And yes, there's money in the bank, but there's only money in the bank because you haven't paid your bills. So it wasn't establishing the ICC. It had actually been around since 1997, but it was reestablishing the ICC, putting it back on a sound financial footing because it's supported almost entirely by its membership. We got very few funds from grants. We reached out to our traditional members first, and our traditional members, 5 of our largest traditional members, including the large hospital systems, joined together to ensure the financial success of the organization and jointly guarantee its financial stability. Each one of those 5 members contributes currently, because of our HIE technology plan. The contribution from each of those members in 2011 will average about $1.4 million. So that's a significant commitment from those groups. But we've also reached out to groups that were not traditional, not folks you might ordinarily think of, to bring more people into membership who could support a healthier community. And probably the best example of that is, I don't think many people would think of the county jail, but in Travis County and in Williamson County, the county jails are part of our system because they do provide health care to people who are in the jails. We also have brought in the emergency medical services in Travis County, as well as the hospital systems and their emergency rooms. And that's an important point because what we're trying to do, number 7 on this page here, was participation is influenced by whether community members believe that benefits outweigh the cost. And just using that as an example, one of the things that surprised me was that emergency medical services also have frequent users, just like the emergency room do. There were people who were calling the ambulance 10 times a day at an average run of $400 per ambulance run. And then the hospital emergency rooms we're seeing and the jails we're seeing, quite often they're the same people who quite often share behavioral health issues. So we've joined together with all of those, and we're created what we call a frequent user program to share data, to understand what the problems those individuals are facing, and to get more intensely involved with those groups. So we have reached out to and brought into membership county governments, school systems, jails, emergency medical services, homeless shelters, almost everybody in our community who is involved in any way in improving the health of the community. But having said that, again, collaboration isn't easy. It's the old story. Someone once said that a guy out of college joined his first job, and he said to the boss, "I don't know if I like this. It's it's competitive, dog eat dog. It's not like college." And the boss said, "No, it's not. It's like high school." Everybody remembers that, right? Even I do. But nonprofit world, it's not the warm and fuzzy that I initially thought it was. It's competitive. Someone pointed out we're friends when we sit at the table. When we walk away, we're competing for grants. It's egos. It's territoriality. So it's a constant massaging. The idea of the collaborative is it isn't the staff who make things work. The collaborators are supposed to work together. The ICC is its utility. We provide a framework for facilitating interaction. We provide technology, and we provide what we call analytics, consulting advice. We have over 1.5 million records in our database. We're constantly refreshing it, analyzing that data, and providing consulting to our members. But it's ultimately up to the members to come together and be collaborative.
Thank you, Carl. Tracy, do you have any comments on that, or Connie, or Susan?
Connie. The only thing I was going to add, Susan? Go ahead, Tracy. Yes?
No, I would just very much agree that collaboration is not easy. It's something that, it's an effort. It doesn't come together you can all sit at a table, but if you're not willing to be active participants at that table, it's not going to work. You have to be willing to listen to each other, and listening is not waiting to be heard. It's hearing and then processing what you heard, and then letting someone else hear what you have to say in response to that. So you're going to have to give up some of the things that you wanted initially. You're probably going to have to give up, but that's okay, because you're going to probably end up getting something better down the road. My idea is great, your idea is great, but our idea together is really probably better. It's just going to be harder to get there.
I was just going to add something maybe with a little different twist, and that is collaboration is indeed hard work, but there's kind of two kinds that, I'm not as old as Carl, but
Thank you.
I probably am.
Let's talk about that.
No, but I've had several different careers, one in healthcare and hospital administration, and then one in fundraising, and now in my current role, I think it's a blend of all those things. But the one thing I think about is working with a collaboration that is already in place, where you're not really collaborating, but you're called that, and you're not clear on what the main focus is sometimes more difficult to turn around than starting fresh. But both of them need everybody to be very clear on what you're trying to accomplish, because if you can really put that out there, then I think it gives you room to bring those ideas to the table, because otherwise you're just competing, with your own thoughts, with somebody else's thoughts. So if you can't get that out there and get that really clear, then you might as well just back up, and start again tomorrow with something. But that's what came to mind.
Probably for the Breast Health Collaborative of Texas is, I think we have the common denominator of breast cancer, but we all come from so many different angles, and as I think was mentioned earlier, the different, we have really big institutions, medical institutions that are involved with the collaborative, and we have really small little, support groups and individuals. And I think it's what Tracy said, you've got to probably check your ego at the door, check probably even the agenda of your organization, and come in with somewhat of a clean slate. And I think that's how then you can start bringing ideas in and seeing how they fit onto this new tablet, and working and seeing how they work together, but also staying focused on what that mission is. What are we in the room for? And for the Breast Health Collaborative, it's all focusing on access to care and bridging the gap. So we know that. And so when we bring our different organizations together, we want them to come in with that common focus.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Oh,
Seriously?
That lunch crowd.
Really?
Snap it up.
Well, I know one of our board members, Jim Henderson, he made a distinction for us, which, you know, we knew it, but it really kind of helped us, jolt us into a better understanding that instead of nonprofit, we need to call it not-for-profit, because the work that's being done is not so you can pay out better dividends to your stockholders, but it's to improve communities. So it's a social return, but not a dollar return. So my next question goes to Tracy. Tracy is the lead agency of the Episcopal Homeless Initiative and Stabilizing Lives. Can you share a bit about the very time-sensitive funding opportunity that was presented to the Beacon, Community of the Streets, and Palmer Way Station? And please share some of the lessons or experiences you had as a fiscal agent and some of the lessons you learned from that experience.
Okay, if y'all don't think she just put me on the hot seat, oh my gosh. All right, about 2.5 years ago, sitting here in, was it this room, at this conference, it was a lot colder because we were doing it in January, I think. Yeah, January. I was sitting at the table with Terry Henry, back there, Community of the Streets, and Felisa Palmer, who is not here today, but she's the executive director. I'm sorry, Terry is Palmer Way Station, and Felisa Palmer is Community of the Streets. And we talked about working together and about how there were a lot of things that each one of us did at our agencies that the other didn't. There were some things that we learned about each other that we didn't know that services were being offered. We talked about different gaps that we all missed, that maybe if we, you know, what could we do? How can we fill some of those gaps? How can we meet some of our clients' needs if we work together? And it was one of those things that, you know, you talk about things at a conference and it's great, and we had the best of intentions. We walked away from the conference and there wasn't any, we didn't have any funding behind us to do that. And we all know, just realistically, we walk out of here with the best of intentions, but if we don't have funding behind us, it's probably not going to happen. 9 months later, we were, again, Celine brought us together, this time at the Charities office, and she had with her Jackie Broussard, who many of you know. She is very wonderful at identifying resources and bringing people together and making things happen really fast. She identified some funding, and this affected not only the 3 agencies that I've already mentioned, but Tal Costa sitting back there, it affected her as well, but she didn't know it at the time. Because there was some funding out there that was coming down from the state. We call it HHSP, Homeless Housing Service Prevention, I think is what it is, yeah. And there was about $5.8 million coming to Houston that was to be divided, was to be used for support services for the homeless. And the city was able to allocate it however they wanted to whatever agencies, and the city had already decided that Search was getting part of it and Bread of Life was getting the other part of it, period, the end, just those 2. Well, we ended up sitting at a table, Felisa and Terry and Charlie Weldon, who's my development director right there in the front table, and Jackie and I sat at a table with Keith Bynum from the city of Houston, and about 2 days after this meeting with Jackie basically told us that there's this money out there. It's already been committed, but she thinks she can get us part of it. But there were a couple of things standing, a couple of catches. The first, we had to convince the city that we could and we would collaborate on something. If we weren't willing to collaborate as the 3 of us, that it just wasn't going to work and it wasn't going to happen. And then the second, the city was going to have to go talk to Tal Costas at Search and to Rudy Rasmus at Bread of Life and see if they would be willing to share some of the funding that had already been allocated to them. So yeah, that was fun. And Tal's here and she still talks to me, so it's all good. So we just went forward with an attitude of yes on everything. So we thought, okay, what can we collaborate on? Everybody in here who, I don't care what population you serve, if it's an underserved population, case management is highly, highly lacking for everybody. that is so, no exception for homeless services. We desperately, desperately need case management. The Beacon is heavily run by volunteers. About 85% of what we do at the Beacon is carried out by community volunteers. In the kitchen, in the laundry, in the showers, at intake, volunteer reception, administratively, we really use those volunteers. About 2 years before this meeting, we needed case management really, really badly. I had one social worker on staff besides myself and the program manager for Bridget's Hope, which has no impact on the Beacon daily services. And case management was so needed, I thought, we've got no money for this, but we have a lot of volunteers. And I spent 6 years before my time at the Beacon at the Cathedral at Child Advocates. And for those of you who have any knowledge of Child Advocates, they train and utilize community volunteers in a very powerful way. And I have seen the power of a well-trained community volunteer. So we piloted a program. We took a handful of volunteers and trained them to do case management light, as one of my board members called it. Because there's certain things that volunteers can't do, and it has to go on to one of the professional staff. So I knew this worked, but I knew that we needed more training, and I was able to discuss this with Felisa and Terry and Celine, and we decided that if we could get someone that could train volunteers for all 3 sites, that could recruit and coordinate volunteers for all 3 sites, that this could work. And each site would interpret the training and the implementation of the program according to the personality of the particular site. Social work at its best, self-determination. So we put this together. Charlie was given, this was on a Thursday, and we had to have a grant ready by Monday. And I'm talking the following Monday. So she had like the weekend to put this grant together for us and did a fabulous job. We were sitting in Keith's office, and he was amazed that we were willing to work together, not only with ourselves, but also with the community and the volunteers. And he said, okay, this can work, but I've got to make a couple of phone calls to Tao and Rudy. So long story short, we got $1.2 million. And that was to be used at all 3 sites. Well, 3 sites, 3 money systems. The city was not about to cut checks to 3 different sites. They're going to cut 1 check, and they're going to do one audit, and they're going to do one. And well, it went out on Beacon letterhead, and the Beacon was in had a little, because we've got Cathedral support. We have some financial backing that kind of gives us some play if we needed to do some fronting money, which we needed to do because it was a reimbursement system. So we ended up almost by default becoming the fiscal agent. Yeah, that was fun. It's still fun. It's been a challenge. I will say that one of the things that has happened that's been really, really amazing in the collaborative spirit is the flexibility of our partners. Terry in the back, his board started getting a little antsy about managing social workers and bringing on more people onto his payroll, because that was just something they really weren't in a position to do. And so Terry and his board chair and I sat down together and tried to figure out a solution. And we said, well, hey, what if we were to send social workers that were on the Beacon's payroll to Palmer Way Station when you're open, and they don't have to be housed there permanently, but just they can be on site. And Terry was all over it, and so was Pat. But the steering committee, the board, was kind of like, well, I don't know, maybe. And so they worked on it. They worked on their board and got an okay. And guys, how's it worked for you?
Great.
Yeah. So part of it, and so it was that flexibility. So really, the fiscal agent with them is very different than the fiscal agent with Community of the Streets. When you play with money, you're sometimes, it's real difficult, because the power comes with money, and even if it's power you didn't really want or power that you didn't expect. So we've had to make sure that we're going way, way overboard in making sure that everybody knows what we're doing, how we're spending the money, and if we forget to tell somebody something, even if it was an honest mistake to forget to tell somebody something, our credibility comes into question. And so we've really had to work on making sure that we're as absolutely transparent as possible, that we're absolutely as communicative as possible. And we've learned a whole lot about how we would do things differently, administratively and others. And one of my big lessons is be careful what you ask for.
Thanks, Tracy. Carl or Connie or Susan, do you have any comments?
Good work.
Any questions from the audience? Wow.
What would you do differently?
What would I do differently?
Yeah.
I have it's sort of related, but do all of you have collaborations that have their own staff? Do all of you have collaborations that have their own collaboration staff to run it? Or are you like the Beacon with a lead agency that maybe has more administrative responsibility for the collaboration than?
I'll start with that. So going back to where there's a need that forms, the need comes first and then the collaborative. So as we got going, yes and no. We had no paid staff. It was organizations coming together, putting in what they had their strengths in. The Rose and Komen were definitely leaders in what they were providing in putting the summit together at the beginning. The Rose and then Dorothy really carried the torch for several years, and the Rose staff, Dorothy's administrator, kind of shared her time with us, but with us being the collaborative. One of the key factors of whether I would step in as chair, as I told Dorothy when she was asking me, I said, okay, from our strategic plan, one of our goals was to have an executive director, and I said, I will only do the chair if the executive director is hired and in place. And so just this past October, we have Lynn Woodlasky. So I think it moved in that direction.
Thank you.
We didn't have that luxury. I mean, a lot of things that we had was not, because it happened so quickly, we didn't get an MOU. What would we do differently? We would have an MOU in place first, but there was no way. There was no time. And so because we didn't have an MOU in place first, it took us months to get that together, and there was a lot of sticking over that, and there was a lot of, we all had ego involved. I mean, and I had ego involved in it, and it was a real sticking point, and it was something I think we all learned and grew as a process because of it. But you know what I'll also say, much to the credit of the community as a whole, specifically the homeless service providers, you know, that money, that HHSP money that came to the community, and that there are basically 3 recipients of the funding: Search, Bread of Life, Episcopal Homeless Initiative. We decided pretty early on that we knew that if we were out there in the gladiator pit fighting for that money, if it were to come around again, that it was going to be ugly, and there's a really good chance that none of us would get it. So Tal Costas she led the charge in bringing us all together, and so we've been working to show how we're all filling gaps that each other is not filling, and working with advocacy at the state level, at the city level, to show that we want the money for services for the clients so bad that it doesn't really matter who has what part, as long as the money comes back to Houston. That's what we're really looking for, because if we lose the money in Houston, then we lose an amazing amount of services that we're currently providing for a very, very population that is so in need. Whoa. And that just went off. There we go. So it's that ego, and it's also you have to keep your clients in mind. You have to keep them at the forefront of your mind, because if you don't, it will kill it'll kill your agent, and it'll kill your goals. Just absolutely will.
I was going to answer, Martha, but I want to know a little bit more behind your question, because the Coalition for the Homeless, yes, we have staff. But are there collaborative efforts or collaboratives that we're putting together where we have enough staff to even manage that club? No. So the interesting thing to me is still thinking about who should be, what is the purpose, who should be at the table, to get the right people at the table, and then it's still hard work all the way through, but it makes for much more interesting dynamics, and then that's how you get the skills that you need there as well.
Please.
I would say for the ICC, we do have a good fortune of having, I think we have now 8 full-time staff, and my services are donated by Lone Star Circle of Care, so be careful what you get for free. Also, our CFO's services are donated by Lone Star Circle of Care, and then we purchase a number of services outside. A lot of our IT services, the process of creating the HIE is an external firm that we employ to do that. So we couldn't do what we do without having a centralized staff, but we also get a lot of, our members participate very actively. There are donated services all around. So Seton, for example, have 2 people who are very committed to ICC, and I would guess collectively each one of them spends somewhere between 7 to 10 hours a week on that. St. David's has a number of people. So we depend a lot, not only on our paid staff, but on people in the community who are members to give their time.
Tracy, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I'm just curious, I know you had to kind of jump into it, but did you establish a collaborative stakeholder task force, or did you all meet on an ad hoc basis? And were you all able over time to establish some sort of an appreciative survey type process where you would get feedback and then adjust on the kind of as you went?
Okay, that's a multi-level question with multi-level answers. As far as a formal stakeholders board or committee, no, we have not done that, other beyond what the charities has already put together, which is fabulous. It's the Episcopal Homeless Initiative. Partners in Stabilizing Lives is one project of the Episcopal Homeless Initiative, which is not restricted just to Episcopal entities. So we meet with them on a regular basis. I also meet with the other recipients of this funding on a regular basis in order to make sure that we're all on the same track. As far as bringing those 2 together, that's actually a really good point, and that's probably what will end up coming out of this conference, I have a feeling. It's the training. We've got a very structured training for our volunteers now. We took the training to like 10 levels beyond what it was, and that's something that we definitely get feedback from our volunteers that are trained. And then we have client satisfaction surveys that are just now getting ready to be rolled out. And then we have our team, part of the case manager's jobs at the Beacon, and this comes back to each organization tailoring it according to what their organization wants to do. Each one of our case managers are working with the volunteer staff to contact all of our clients who have been provided with intensive case management services. And that's so that they can see how are you doing, what's going on, what do you need, what's, just kind of to do that, to track that. Not even so much as an outcome measurement, but as a client service and a client case management focus. Did that answer your question?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So my question has to do with capacity.
Yes.
And we've talked about funding, we've talked about having staff to staff the collaborative, and what I'd like you to speak on are really the nuts and bolts of syncing up your data management systems. And so, it seems like every nonprofit has their own system that they like, whether it's homegrown or off the shelf. And so how do you sync up data collection to collectively communicate results?
So we asked St. Luke's Episcopal Health Charities with the portal. as you all saw on the video. That is actually one of our biggest assets, and even our members don't realize what a big asset that is. So we have this portal that is pulling together, as members come on, we ask them now to put their information on the portal. We find people to be part of the collaborative by them looking and seeing the portal is out there. So we actually had this incredible gift given to us by St. Luke's Episcopal Health Charities, and we thank them. And it is growing, and Lynn is doing an amazing job of really growing that. We're working with our community healthcare workers again. HCC, one of their projects is to take on certain counties of the 234, 37, whatever it is, in Texas, and they've all picked different counties and are researching agencies in those counties to go and then add onto this database, which has been, again, I repeat, it's an asset that even our members don't realize, and that's one of the marketing things that we're working on is, you know, if you build it, they will come kind of approach.
Connie, let me hit that before you hit yours, because yours is going to build off mine. Yours is going to build right off mine. The Beacon had its own database for up until December, and because in order to receive certain funding, federal funding, et cetera, if you're providing homeless services, you have to be on a system called HMIS, Homeless Management Information System, that in Harris County and Houston is managed and operated by the coalition. And the Beacon is a thorn in poor Errol's side. Errol is their director of IT, because we see overall 500 people plus a day. We had over 130,000 visits by over 11,000 unduplicated clients last year. For the grant, that $1.2 million grant, that among the 3 agencies, we said that we would see 500 case management clients over the course of 18 months. Between June and December of last year, the 3 agencies, and most of them being at the Beacon and or Palmer, we saw 1,200. So we, and we're now at 2,000 and have not even hit a year yet. So we have quadrupled the numbers that we said we would do. Because we haven't, and in the middle of all of this, we transitioned from our original database to HMIS in December. That was 25,000 people that we had to hand put into HMIS because it would not upload from our Access database. It's very, very difficult. One of the things that it's conceptually beautiful, and one of the things that we're doing, working very hard with the coalition, because we do believe in the data and we do believe it's very important, and we do believe that having all of us be on that data so we can all share the data and have more powerful outcome measurement is really giving honest feedback to the coalition. And I have to applaud the coalition staff. It's amazing. Every time we highlight an issue, someone on the coalition staff comes to the Beacon and sits down and figures stuff out, and there have been many times that they have said, wow, we didn't know this was a deficit. Thank you so much for showing this to us. We need to figure out how to fix this. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but your team is awesome.
Thank you. I hate to interrupt, but I do want to get to the specific question for Connie and then for Susan. So I will go ahead and do that if that's okay with you
I
guys.
want to hear my response. I'll meet you afterwards.
Connie, our question for you is to address how vulnerable it may feel reaching out to others you need in order to accomplish your big idea, and why it may take someone not necessarily the leader, but more of an organizer or energizer to recognize others' strength. And then, you know, just, do you think we'll get to a point where agencies will choose to collaborate and not have to be encouraged so much to collaborate?
You may have to remind me of all 3 of those questions, but the first one is the easiest for me. Why so vulnerable? What are those feelings? But how many of you have been in charge of initiating a collaborative, a collaborative. Raise those hands high. How many people have been a part of a collaborative? So many more. So I think there is, to me, the one thing I always think about is it's probably one of those humbling situations you can be in, because you really have to get out there and expose yourself. You expose your ideas. You trust other people to come to the table. Even if you handpicked every single one of them, everybody's coming with their own backgrounds, personal feelings, cultures, and you're going to share those together at the table. And the only way to keep yourself sane and straight thinking is to keep thinking about your purpose and why you're there. But still, in your heart, you're a person and you have feelings. So you are going to, the thing I always, first I do pray about it, because for me, that is the thing that makes me also think about, okay, get over your big self on this, because you may think you're coming with the idea, but if you come with enough room to allow others to have their say, I think that's where the magic starts happening, because you're either, something bigger is going to come out of that original thought and it's going to gel together, and that's going to really make your collaborative strong. A lot of my friends know that it's good getting older, because sometimes you don't remember things, and they'll go, I'll tell them, that was the best idea, and they'll go, well, that was your idea. Oh no, that wasn't my idea, it was your idea. But to me, that's a great collaborative, because you're kind of in there, just duking it away together. The hardest part too, to me, is that you have to remember that struggles precede growth. It's not going to be great. You're not going to come in there and go, yeah, we're going to do it. I mean, you're going to struggle, because if it were so easy, it might have been done already. If you really are working on something that's worthy, you're going to pull together some diverse groups of people, great thinkers. But what I love the most, and this gets into the second part of the question, is you may not always have to be the voice or the spokesperson. You may, as the push, or the collaborator, you may pick somebody to lead the charge. And for me, I'll give you everything I've got, but I don't have to be the one standing right there, encouraging everyone. And how many people have done Strength Finders? Strength Finders? Strength Finders, if you do this, if you read the book and you do the test, there's supposed to be 5 God-given strengths that you personally have. And so my number 1 is strategic, and I'm an activator, but I have woo envy. One of the categories is woo, and that's getting people pulled in. So no, it's not in my top 5. So maybe it's 6. But you might want a woo to lead the charge, because that's who's going to pull it all in. And the greatest joy for me is finding out the strengths in the group and letting each one of those individuals kind of lead the charge in their respective areas. So to me, that's the joy of being in a collaborative, no matter how hard it is kind of letting some of that magic work. And a good friend of mine always reminds me, don't give up before the miracle happens, because it's just that roller coaster. It's like, whoa, you will never make it, and then you come back around. And what was that third thing?
Let's see. Oh, how can we make the shift to think collaboratively, not only when it's a have to, but when it's the right decision?
I think we do. I think we think that way anyway. I think it's having the energy and the finding something that's that important that you might be the one to go initiate that collaboration. Is the harder thing to do. And I think that's what happens a lot of time, especially in the nonprofit world, even in the business world, from a corporate background. I think we get so focused, on what we're doing, and we are competitive, that it is sometimes harder to raise out of it and think about that collaboration. But I will tell you, being over a nonprofit that served homeless families with children, it was very hard for me to have some discussions with the board to say, all right, are we serving this building? Is it we have 2 transitional units and they serve 30 units each? Are we serving that building, or are we actually trying to serve families with children who are homeless? Because then that opens you up to a whole different set of thinking. You might not do everything inside that building. So let's think about then, how many are out there? How many of those children are in school registered as homeless? And I think, that makes a world of difference. So if you can get the data, you can look at the big picture. I know in Houston-Harris County, we have over 11,000 children registered in the ISDs as being homeless. They're either in a shelter, in their car, or doubled up, tripled up in somebody else's house. I do know that on any given night, we have between 8,000 and 10,000 people who are homeless, in Harris County. And to me, that's the big numbers. And so once you start looking at that, then we can potentially carve out how we're going to struggle with it, how we're going to work on it. But it takes some really, I think I think these are the best jobs in the world, because I do think we have all the potential in the world to come together and make big changes together.
Thanks, Connie. Any questions from the audience? Oh, we're being really quiet. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How do you do healthcare with wellness? I mean, do you coordinate with all kinds of people in order to take care of all needs?
Well, that, of course, since that was my original background, I love that one more than anything. But there are organizations out there that are doing healthcare right now, and even Tracy, it might even be better for her to respond to it. I think that right now there are a lot of organizations doing a lot of good work. What I haven't had a chance to do just yet is really take a look at that big picture to see at what level, is that health care being provided, to those who are homeless.
In Houston and Harris County, we have two major providers for healthcare for the homeless. One of them is called Healthcare for the Homeless of Houston and Harris County. Their main offices are out of Search, and then there's a clinic on site at the Dunn Center where the Beacon is, and I can't remember where the third clinic is right now. Star of Hope, thank you. And Healthcare for the Homeless they're a fabulous organization. At the Beacon, we have primary medical care, intensive case management, and psychiatric and mental health services, which is huge. There's dental and primary medical care at Search. And the Harris County Hospital District also does healthcare specifically for the homeless. And there are street outreach teams as well. And Harris County Hospital District has some pods. Then there also Healthcare for the Homeless also does case management and outreach. Like at Palmer Way Station, they're there a couple of times a week. And so there are specific pods out there because it is a very unique type of healthcare, whether it's mental, dental, primary.
But we do have gaps. We know we have a gap specifically in mental health. We do know that there's a big gap for those who are cycling through the criminal justice system.
Thank you.
We do know that even as Cal and I are working on a potential grant together, that as we sat there, it was a puzzle to think about, all right, who could go here and then match that with housing. I mean, that's the one where, that's when your happy hour has to start, because it's like, wow, because you're sitting there going, all right, I think I got 5 of these and 2 of these, and that's only gonna last 2 years. And so that is, one of the things we're working on right now is just a really good gap analysis. We're doing it with the health department as well to first, ask, it'll be done, hopefully it'll be done in the fall, but it started with the enumeration or point in time count. Then we did assessments, and we did one-on-one assessments with different stakeholders in the community, as well as those who are consumers. But at the end, we will backtrack and look at who's providing what service or has that service, and what is the capacity for that level of service. So that's where it's really gonna, because you can go, yes, we provide A, B, and C, but you're gonna be full at some point.
Absolutely.
So that's where the real challenge starts.
Thank you, Connie. Are there any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to Susan's question then. Susan, the Breast Health Collaborative is newly formed, and in a relatively short span of time, you've grown substantially. Can you please share how and why the collaborative was formed, what growing pains you have overcome, and the bonds and the relationships that have been developed?
So I think Dorothy touched on it when she spoke earlier this morning. the collaborative was actually birthed from the summit, and the summit was the genius of Heather and, at the time, Michelle Ostrander from Komen and Dorothy from the Rose saying, hey, who is out there? We need to be getting together. In the world of breast cancer, you know, pink fatigue, don't get it, because we still have a lot to do. But there seems to be a lot of organizations out there. And so what we wanted to find out, I think what their approach was what's going on out there? Let's bring everybody into the same room. We all had our little turfs, as we heard earlier, in what we were doing and how we were raising our money, but bringing everybody into the same room was a real need, because it was eye-opening, that first summit. Who was even in the room? Oh, did you know there was an Asian Breast Cancer Coalition? No. Did you know there was a lesbian women's health initiative? No. Did you know that, I mean, it was just really eye-opening for me, I know, and I think I speak for many that were in the room. From that, we actually came around to the second summit, and it was around that same time that we realized, wow, a year is a long time, and we need to be meeting on a more regular basis. And so we were just laughing, and we met in the conference room of the Rose, and there were probably 15 different organizations at the table saying, yeah, we want this more often, and what did that look like, and let's start talking about that. And we went from the summit to asking people if they wanted to meet quarterly. Now we meet monthly. You know, sometimes you feel like you've got a lot of meetings, but meetings provide communication, and communication and networking is what I think has been the amazing part and the amazing growth around the Breast Health Collaborative of Texas. And there's a collaborative going on, and then little collaborations within the collaborative happening all the time. I think that also is what is making it worthwhile, and as we're growing and learning how to tell people about it, what are the assets? And I spoke about the portal being one, but I think the networking that can go on. We have every other month meetings with the large collaborative, and the numbers went from 35 members to over 270, is that what, 75 that we're up to. And that includes from nonprofits, profit organizations, individuals, everybody who has an interest in the breast health arena can be a part of the collaborative. There's no restrictions, there's actually no fee. And so it is something that we are trying to continue to grow. And the biggest, I think, probably the biggest obstacle is, and thank you, Celine, for going from when we originally started this, and it was the greater Houston area, and Celine said, but why don't you make it of Texas? And it's not Rhode Island, it is Texas. And so a challenge is how big our boundaries are, but that's also our benefit. It can be, and the boundaries of Texas go far and wide, and with that, the need is really great. So what our mission is further than the surrounding counties of Harris County. It is way down in the valley and out west, and we're trying to get further and further and more representation across the state. But I think going back to when you get people in a room, things happen that you maybe not were expecting. It is amazing what happens, and I think Dorothy and Heather were talking about a moment that happened a few years ago. There was this big hurricane called Ike, and it came through town, and UTMB is one of our member organizations, and as we all found out, UTMB was at a very pivotal point before the storm, and was losing a lot of funding, and you know, what's UTMB, who are they, why are they here? Oh boy, did we find out who they were and how important they were to us when Ike hit. But what was really awesome was they were down and out, and there was funding from Komen to UTMB to serve all these women. And how do you serve women when you don't have any way to serve them? And the Rose stepped in, and they took over the prison contract. They took over many of the sites that UTMB couldn't get to, and the Rose stepped in and really pulled all their forces together. And I actually, you know, I'll toot Pink Ribbons Project's horn as well, because we were, the way we give out our money into the community, we still had money at the end of the year to hand out. And with those services down, they had a mobile unit that they couldn't get going because they also had this big layoff. And we put salaries out there to start bringing the mobile van around, which, you know, then got the Rose, you know, back on, gave the Rose some more help in serving the areas that needed to be served. And I think I'm saying all that right, but that happened because we were all in the same room at one point and mentioned trust and respect. And wow, okay, maybe I can't get it from where I thought I could get it, but because we all were talking, communicating, and really focusing on this common effort, there are these mission moments. And I think a great way to start any meeting, as we heard earlier, is to hear what those mission moments are. And I think in a collaborative, when you start to hear them, light bulbs go on of what you can do around the room with each other. I think strength in numbers is really important, and leveraging resources is what we're about, and getting a louder voice.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions from the audience on that?